How you doing, guys and girls? Welcome back. We've just got into the thick of Francois Botha's story about the Chinko River and catching Goliath tigerfish and some of his extraordinarily huge catfish species. So if you've just joined us or you're following us from the other video, Francois is going to break down some of the catfish species he caught, and he's going to finish off and tell us about those incredible Goliath tigerfish species. Let me just add him back on there. He should be on here shortly. Welcome back to everyone who's just joined us again. And Francois should be live. And there he is. Can you hear me, Fran?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
Okay,
where were we? We were on these catfish.
Yeah, you're telling us about, okay, so you just basically landed a shaved gorilla / hippopotamus of a fish.
Yeah. So, so there's actually a story, and I hope that, people don't mind me telling it, but there was actually at the Chinko, from the day I arrived there, everybody said there are these enormous catfish, there are these enormous catfish and stuff. I mean, and they must be so big, and they must be so big, and I always like, it's like that story about that catfish that's so big that it blocked the sluice gates at a hydro plant and nonsense like that. I mean, have I heard enough of these stories, right? And there's actually a horrific story about somebody that had drowned on that river, and that this person, when they flew in the patrol, they found his body, and his body was being pulled about by crocodiles. And when they sent the patrol and they reached the body in the area, they weren't crocodiles, they were catfish that was pulling this body about and stuff. So
is this the same species of that big
well, we don't know.
Catfish?
No, we don't know. So, but so there are these stories, right? And anyway, we were probably about 3 or 4 weeks into our trip, and we were going down this particularly beautiful little stretch of river, and it was extremely clear. And we were also there, getting information about, wildlife and stuff. And so, just a little bit further down from us, a hippo appeared, like blew the bubbles kind of vroom, and then went down again. And I said, oh, okay, hippo, everybody wait. And so we all gathered the boats together, stopped the boats and looked downstream and looked, and the hippo didn't reappear.
Yeah, because obviously a lot of people that are just joining us, Francois, don't actually understand, some of the international clients, the dangers that a hippo poses. I mean, it's arguably the most dangerous animal in the whole of Africa. It kills more people, second only to the mosquito, as I understand it.
Yes, but in this case, in the Chinko, I must say the hippos are not a problem at all. Number one, there's not many of them.
Yeah.
And number two, they're so scared of humans that they don't act like normal hippos do. Any hippo there that survived has survived because he didn't come into contact with human beings. So most certainly, it's a great thing about the Chinko is that these hippos don't come close to you. Anyway, so we're looking downstream. This hippo came up once, didn't come up again. So we continue a little bit further down and down, and then as we get close to the spot where he come up, but he comes up again. But guess what? It's not a hippo. It's a catfish. Yeah. Okay, this thing comes up. And Ed and I just stood agape. We just, oh my God. And by now we're at a good enough angle, and the water's clear enough, and it's over white sand, and this thing is pitch black. You thought nobody was going to see him. and he goes, and he just goes and sits on the bottom again. And this thing is, it's colossal. I couldn't, it must have been, venture a guess how big it was. Look, it was a 200+ pound fish. I mean,
that's insane.
And it's that Wunde species. I mean, it was so long. It looked like a monster. It looked like one of those things you see, when you're a kid, you open this book and there's a picture of a sea monster. I mean, it looked like that. So, I mean, I just say to it, slow down. It slows the boat down and stuff. I just grab whatever rod I've got, and I've got a fly. I just tied that morning, man, or that evening, and I spent a lot of time tying this fly.
But you knew.
But I saw this thing, and it's sitting, and right behind it, a foot behind it, there's a mudfish or something digging in the ground just behind him. It was, and it's just like an aquarium, it's so clear. All right, so he tries his best to slow the boat without making a noise, because that would obviously spook this thing. And we're drifting past it, and I cast upstream of it. And I'm watching the fly sink, and I'm correcting it, pulling it across his line, sinking, pulling. but then it hits the sand just in front of this catfish. Okay. And I'm looking and nothing happens. And as I pull the fly, poof, this thing moves, man. But it just lifts off and starts going, and goes to where the fly was. But by now there's so much drag on my line, I had to pull out. So I go back.
Yeah.
But then this fly just starts sinking. I just intersects and I just give it one strip on the side. And this catfish just climbs on top of it, digs his head into the mud, and then in. Oh man! And that was the end of the story. I mean, this thing.
Yeah.
Oh no! It cleaned me. It snapped my fly line as well. I mean, the thing is that there were so many rocks around that I knew I had lost that fish as soon as it had eaten that fly. It was an impossible task. Anyway, it just destroyed me. And funny enough, we got to this one area where people say they see a lot of them, and while we were there, we didn't see any. But when we were flying out at the end of our trip, I asked the pilot if he could just fly over that spot once. And as we flew over that spot, I looked down, and in one of the shallow sandbarred areas with no flow, there was a fish that size, a similar fish. And it was actively, I actually caught a glimpse of it as it was straight and turned and poof, dug into the mud. And I could see it from the air. It was so big. So there is really a chance of coming to the Jinko and catching the 4 biggest fish that Africa has to offer on fly. That's it. Incredible. You can. Yeah. You could do it. You could do it. I mean, you could do it. I don't know how you'll pull yourself away from the Goliaths or fishing for them, but I think maybe by a bit of luck you'll catch one of those cats and it'll cream you, and then maybe you'll turn and say, okay, I want maybe another one. But from the species perspective, man, there's lots of species in that river. I mean, Ed found his spirit fish. This Elestes fish, I mean, it looks like a small tarpon, and it's also a fruit eater. It has a very similar mouth to a pacu, massive eye, big silver scales, long forked tail like a milkfish. I mean, it's an incredible little game fish. We actually kept saying, wow, imagine these things could just grow to 10 pounds,
Yeah.
At 10 pounds, I would probably not even fish for Goliath. I would fish for these things because they're acrobatic, they're remarkable, and they react to plops from flies. And you get fairly big ones. I mean, you catch them up to maybe a kilo. But for this species, it's unbelievable. Everything there is supersized. Even the Mberi or all of the Elestine species, they're just much bigger. All of these bottlenose fish, elephant fish, and obviously the common tiger fish. I mean, they're in there. And once again, the river is so spectacular because, I don't have to stand there with a fast sinking line, dredging, and, I get to fish with a floating line, casting at pockets, sometimes fishing a static fly floating across the current and stuff. And I'm picking up fish, man. I'm catching either a tiger here or a Goliath there. And it's just, from a fly fisherman's perspective, I mean, I fished a few rivers. I thought that the Agua-Boa River was one of the most perfect rivers for freshwater fly fishing. And I would say that this ranks, take away the Goliath, and this ranks very close. Put the Goliath in there, and there's no comparison to any other river in the world.
So Francois, instead of blue balling all of the people that are watching this, how the fuck do we go there with you? How do we get in touch with Goliath expeditions? How do we go and have a taste of this unbelievable fishery and make it happen?
Okay, so I see Josh is asking us about the camp.
Yeah.
So like you said, we've invested in this fully, and it took a hell of a lot of convincing. African parks, they're a conservation agency. It's a national park. We're asking them to operate in a park, and there's an obvious issue with the fact that you're not allowed to kill fish or anything. We're not allowed to kill an animal also. Luckily, we hadn't lost another fish, any fly caught fish. And, you know, we negotiated a contract with them to give us an exclusive 5-year operator's license there. You know, that it was a difficult thing to get, but we did. And, you know, subsequently Ed has just been amazing. You know, he's gone and he's raised all the funds, and he's packed an entire, like, I call it a luxury camp. Ed says I'm not allowed to call it a luxury camp. Dude, it's a luxury camp.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, you know, it's like tents with you know, single tents, single accommodation tents with flushing toilets and outside showers, running water, big mesh covered or mesh tents, motors, boats, everything. I mean, he got all of that, packed it into a container. You know, 220 volt electricity in camp, solar powered. Unreal. How do you do these things? How do you do it? Well, ask Ed. He knows how to do it. And he's put all of this into a container, shipped it from Kenya and Mombasa around South Africa into Douala, got it from Douala across to Bangui, from Bangui through God knows what. And it's arrived at I think it's now at the doorstep of the Chinko.
Yeah.
Resort. So, you know, it's a matter of basically building camp, which I don't think is gonna take that long. I think it's an extremely tough job, but it won't take that long. And so we should be operational, you know, from January onwards.
Just in time for us to break this god-awful pandemic.
Yeah.
And what time of year or what time of season? I understand it's still a you know, it's a pursuit really in its bare infancy. But if you were going to, I mean, what types of year do you think are the best, and when are you going to do it year round or seasonally? How's it going to work?
Well, look, so luckily, you know, the people, you know, everybody on the ground there have been there long enough to explain to us exactly how the rainy seasons and when the clarity of the river changes. And they know, because they do all of these, you know, security and anti-poaching flights and so over the river. So we know for a fact that the river cleans up in around December already, and that it stays clear for as late as May. So that's basically our season. I mean, it could be as long as December to May. But what we've decided to do was, you know, we've got a very, so we say, we want to really lower our environmental impact. And, you know, even though we know what we have, I don't think we quite know what we have yet. We don't know how this river is going to respond to any sort of fishing pressure, because it's never had any. And we certainly don't want to spoil it, you know, by trying to turn it into a, you know, a free-for-all, come and fish, you know, let's see how many fish we could catch.
Of course.
So you want to
maintain the prestige of it.
I don't think only that. I mean, Jack, you know, this place is just so perfect. I mean, do you know that after the first time I went, I was actually happy to never return again, as long as nobody else returned either. I think that what's really happened is I was, you know, it's it that convinced me we should do it, because if we didn't, somebody else would as well. And to think that somebody might go in there and change the way it is one of my big motivations of getting in there. And it's also why we've managed to secure quite a few donations and things from like a company like Soraya, and a Japanese company, and so to ensure that our footprint there stays as low as possible, and that we can generate as much funding and as much conservation fees as possible. So making it viable, and also keeping the impact low. So to tell you the truth, I mean, our idea is only to allow, you know, 20 fishermen there in a whole season. So, you know, that's 4 fishermen per week, and, you know, your trip can last anything from 7 to 10 days.
Yeah, Francois, I think that's absolutely fantastic. I think, you know, hats off to you for orchestrating that. The last thing you want to do is, you know, you find something so pure, so fantastic, is to ruin that or to spoil it. And, you know, the prospect of maintaining its integrity for as long as possible, to be appreciated by as many people for what it is, I think is very, very important. So you're saying a trip for
what we're going
max.
to do is, you know, just to a little bit more about the conservation. So what we've also got is, you know, we've got a telemetry project that, you know, we've kickstarted, and, you know, that should take place next year. you know, there are obviously some factors involved there, but we really want to understand the river, and we're having DNA tests done on the fish at the moment. Our scientist, the guy by the name of Thierry Abishir, a Swiss scientist, he believes that he could probably give us a little bit more explanation as to whether these fish can be, where they've come from, you know, by the DNA samples we've taken. And, you know, we're basically facing two things, you know, if these fish are resident or if they migrate. And, you know, from my initial thoughts, that kind of leads to two ways of conservation. The one is internal and the one is external.
Yeah.
So these things are obviously, if they're resident, I think, you know, we must focus way more on protecting them. And I mean, then we definitely can't apply much pressure on them.
Of course.
You know, if the fish are highly migratory, then we must really look outwards, and we must really have better community-based projects and so forth. And I think that we really have a good, and that African parks and them have a very good relationship with nearby towns and fishermen on the outskirts of the reserve. And, you know, it would certainly be great if we could pull this whole thing together. And if the value of the Goliath and the value of the Chinko and the value of a pristine system becomes apparent to not only fishermen like you and I, or people that can afford it, but to the local people as well. I know that that's you know, I know everybody says that. I really think we can do it.
That's incredible, Fran. So for those that have joined us and listened to the story, please go and follow Francois and Ed immediately at Goliath Expeditions. I'm going to save this video to my IGTV, and I'll also do my very best to put the relevant tags and platforms there. I can't guarantee you'll all get a spot there by virtue of the fact that Francois has to take me there first in many successive trips for research purposes, obviously, and of course. And again, if it wasn't for the fly patterns that I had so meticulously and fastidiously strapped for him, you know, he most definitely wouldn't have done the impossible. But Fran, it's you know, an hour and a half is far too short to do this tale any justice. I think that you and I will definitely discuss it again in depth. I want to talk about the tackle. I want to talk about the tactics, the design of the flies in relation to the bait fish, how they swim. You spoke earlier about how, you know, the hook penetration, sort of mechanics of how you put conventional thinking for tiger fish on its head with the tackle and stuff that you ended up using. But as a whole, I think it's unbelievably exciting. I'm very excited. I've been, you know, I've obviously witnessed you doing this, putting this journey together for as long as you have, and getting the feedback. It sounds really fantastic, and the prospect that this could be open to the general public from next year onwards is, it's mind blowing. It's something to bide this pandemic through. But thank you very much for this, Bud. I really appreciate it. Also appreciate you having a shower and a shave. I actually took a picture of Francois earlier yesterday. He looked like a Boomerlaw version of Albus Dumbledore. So I appreciate you looking so manicured and groomed for our interview. But yeah, Francois, it's an incredible achievement, and I think I speak on behalf of a lot of fishermen that are no doubtedly going to explore and enjoy this territory with you. But thank you very much for your efforts, and thank you for the tale that you've told, and for putting yourself out there and doing it. I think it's very exciting, Brew. And I'm looking forward to hopefully one day sharing a trip with you on that river.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, Jack, thank you very much, and thanks everybody for watching.
Cool, man. All the best, bud. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Francois Boonmaster Botha. How are you, sir?
Very good, Jack. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks very much for joining us for our live interview. I don't want to make this too formal. Franny, you're a very good friend of mine. I've known you for, I'd say, most of my adult life. You taught me everything I know in the realms of fly fishing and fly tying. You befriended me when I was a very young, cocky, know-it-all adolescent fly fisherman. You taught me how to cast, and you taught me a lot more about the philosophy and the enigmatic qualities and the romanticism of the sport that we so revere and we so love. And that's what I wanted to talk about this evening. So, Fran, I want you to give the audience an elevator pitch into who you are, where you are currently in terms of your professional life and in the fly fishing industry at the Yokanga, how you came to discover fishing and your journeys, and most importantly, how that ended and resulted with you chasing something which is undoubtedly the highest echelon in fly fishing, and that is, of course, catching the Goliath tigerfish on fly. So shoot from the hip, bud, and thanks very much for joining us. I'm really excited about this.
No, thank you. Thank you for the intro. I don't know if I'm deserving of all of that. I'm not sure I taught you how to cast. I've seen you put out a 40-meter cast, and I'm not quite sure that I can do that. But yeah, you know, I've been a fisherman all my life. That's all that ever really made sense to me. You know, in the times when people were playing on the beaches with shovels and buckets, you know, building sandcastles, I was sitting at the rock pools with hand line and limpets that I'd scratched off the rocks for bait and, you know, fishing.
Yeah.
And I think back then, and this will become quite relevant later in the conversation, is back then, you know, my dad tried to teach me fishing, you know, in the surf and everything like that. But I always more enjoyed the visual aspect. I always look back at the rock pools going, yeah, but I mean, I can see the fish there. And there I can, you know, target specific ones and stuff. And that became a really big influence later. And, you know, I've been fly fishing ever since I was about 17 years old. So, you know, it's coming on to 23 years now that I've been fishing. And in about around 2007 was my big break into fly fishing guiding. And you know, there I started working for a company called Frontier Fly Fishing, and, you know, Cosmoledo was obviously and still is, you know, one of the most amazing places to fish. And there, you know, I kind of realized my first dream, you know, my dream was, you know, funny enough, not to go and catch a GT at Cosmoledo, but to encounter a tiger shark on the flats. And one day I did. And I was religious for some moments, but
yes,
you know, that was always a great ambition, and I think that it was always, you know, it had to be an adventure. You know, it had to be quite far flung. It had to be, you know, very remote and so forth. So, you know, that's where also the adventure side of it, you know, really got hold of me.
And you studied philosophy in varsity, eh, Fran?
Yeah, I did. I studied journalism and philosophy, and you know, that was great. You know, I think that it also maybe adds a lot to the fishing and things. I mean, you'll often hear me with these little phrases and things like that, like philosophical phrases about fly fishing. But yeah, I did study philosophy and stuff, and I think that it was quite important also from a fishing perspective.
I agree. I think it's a massive arrow in your quiver by virtue of the fact that, I mean, if we're being honest, you're not a terribly good guide. I mean, in the trips that I've gone with you, we've had some really, really awful blanks and trips like that. And you have to obviously lean on your God-given talent to be an incredible orator, a fantastic philosophizer. You have to chat, and you've got to keep your guests entertained by virtue of the fact that you just can't get people into decent fish. So I agree. I'll have to take it.
Well, I believe that I guided you into, no, actually it wasn't me, guided you into your biggest tiger, but I did take good photographs.
Yes, no, you did. You most
definitely did. That's the other aspect. You know, photography became a very strong part of it, because, you know, of all of these places that you see, these remarkable places, you know, from the Galapagos Islands, from catching striped marlin in the Galapagos Islands to, you know, the Iberá Marsh in Argentina, which was just this incredible wetland, you know, to these places like the Seychelles and so forth. And it became really important to capture these things, because in many cases we were some of the only people that had ever done it. So it became important to number one, have a record of it, but also to do it well. You know, I was quite inspired by Henry Gilbey's photography. You know, I first came across his photography as I started, you know, with my guiding and things, and I was really quite inspired by it. And you know, that's actually led to a much bigger. Like it's opened the market and the industry a little bit for me. And I mean, you mentioned earlier, you know, the Yokanga, and, you know, so most recently, you know, I've teamed up with a gentleman by the name of Alexis Strelistov, and he's taken over the Yokanga, and he's asked me to manage the marketing and some of the other aspects of it. And it is
Franny, I'm,
You know,
I'm
it's
sorry
such
to
a,
interrupt you. Can you just, again, just break down for some of the people that are joining, what is the Ukanga? To your average lay
so
person in fishing terms, I mean, I
so
remember
you know
you
we're,
describing it to me, and I was just completely blown away. What is it in salmon fishing terms?
wow, what is it in salmon fishing terms? Well, it's some of the people wanting to hear more about the Goliath are probably in the opposite spectrum of the kind of person that would want to fish for salmon. You know, and salmon is something that never really formed a big part of my career or anything like that. And I only fished in Scotland a little bit and so forth. But the Ukanga, if I could explain it, I mean, it is. The salmon is such a noble fish. I think it's the most noble of all of them. They spend their lives, they get born in a river, they spend their lives in the river, and they evade these, they evade other trout and otters and all sorts of predators, and then they swim out to sea, and then they evade seals and sharks and stuff, and make huge migrations, and then come back up to spawn. And I mean, they come back these chrome bars of power and stamina, and it really is such an incredible fish. And the Ukanga is basically one of the best places in the world to go and catch one, particularly a trophy one. So,
Where is it based, Fran?
so
Exactly.
that's Kola Peninsula in Russia, in the North Shore.
Okay.
So the Kola Peninsula in Russia, the North Shore is probably the best known for its big salmon. And it's a very exclusive club of people that fish there. And, there are only a handful of lodges that really offer something very good up there. And, the Ukanga is just one of those, it's just this enigmatic river that holds these tremendously big fish. It has a extremely steep banks. And, the Ukanga is actually, I think it's translated to steep banks from a river. And, if you speak to the people that really know about salmon, they'll say that and a few other things, such as big pools, long pools and things, and a big system, would harbor or would be an indication of big fish. Whether that's true or not, I'll tell you what, in our case it is. So, we were extremely lucky to be able to get this opportunity to take it over. And we've been very busy with things like, rebranding and changing a few things. Our goal really is to become one of the best destinations the world has to offer for fishing, regardless of what species it is. And we certainly have the resource to do so. We're putting in a lot of investment and a lot of time into making it that. And, I think that we will achieve our goal relatively soon.
Well, that's an incredible accolade to have. And I mean, it's quite an improvement and quite a progression from sort of cutting your teeth, I believe, in the UK. And Farlows, you started catching trout and pike, and you worked there prior to obviously starting at Frontier Flyfishing.
Yeah, I worked at House of Hardy. My life, ever since I remember, when I was at school, you always had these boffins or these geeks that said that they were going to go do some holiday work or internships and stuff. And I used to look at them going like, what? Like, what?
Yeah.
Why would you want to do that? And, when I started fly fishing within months, I found myself standing at Mark Ellen's door at, I think it was called the Fly Shop. And, there I worked for a holiday and eventually worked for his father at Fly Rod and Reel. And, when I went overseas, the first, the obvious thing was for me to try and get a job in retail. And I walked into House of Hardy of Pall Mall when it used to be there opposite St. James's Palace. And I said, do you guys have a job for me? And they gave me a job. I couldn't believe it. And I think that those were the best days of my life. I used to arrive early for work, at least an hour early every day, like just in case somebody else was early and could open up so that I could just get going. And at the time, Hardy's were struggling a little bit from a sales and from a brand perspective and so forth. And, my manager, Nick Armstead, that joined just after me, who's now at Game Fish of Edinburgh, we teamed up and really we turned that place around. And, it wasn't so much necessarily in the sales, but it just like I even went and painted walls and built rod racks and things like that. And it was just one of the most spectacular times. And there, I think my mind also opened up to, adventure fishing and fly fishing. But that's also where one day, by then I had learned about this Goliath tigerfish. And I must say it was something that just captured my mind. I I couldn't forget about this fish that everybody had said was just, this massive tiger fish that lived in Central Africa or in the Congo River. And funny enough,
you first heard about the Goliath when you were in House of Hardy.
No. I actually first heard about it in Fly Rod and Reel, and a guy called Peter Besaidnout, who was a fairly well-known fly tyer and supplier at the time, told me about them, and then I started learning more and more about them. And when I arrived at Hardy's a few years later, they said, but there's a book about it, and there was this book somewhere down the Crazy River, written by Jeremy Wade and Paul Booth.
Yeah.
And I was actually standing in the shop front one day, and this disheveled guy with this old barber jacket, and he looked like the guy looked like he hadn't taken a bath in a few weeks or so. And he's standing around, and I'm quite hesitant to help him. And a guy called Mark Anderson says to me, "Do you know who that is?" I said, "No, I don't." He said, "That's Paul Booth. He's the co-author of the book." And so, I grabbed at the opportunity to go and speak with him, and he was pretty cagey about, what they'd done there, etc. But, here I first made contact with somebody that had actually fished for me. And, and in the minute I explained my ambition to catch them on fly, he just looked at me and he was just like, "There's no way."
Yeah.
There's no way you'll do it. And, then already did I start learning about, just how rare or how difficult it is to catch this fish, and these guys were talking about putting 17 hooks on the traces with trebles and stuff, and still couldn't hook up to these things, and finding them in this amazingly big river, and how strong they were and so forth. So he just looked at me and said, "There's no way you're going to do it."
Yeah. So biologically speaking, just give us again an elevator pitch on the fish. I had some American anglers comment today on my newsfeed. They saw a picture and they said, "Yeah, that's a tiger. That's very cool." And obviously made relations to some previous posts I'd made about my tiger clouser. And I was trying to say, look, a tiger fish is a noble fish. But it's like, without being disrespectful to the typical tiger we find in the Zambezi systems, comparing a tiger fish to a Goliath tiger fish is like comparing a herring to a tarpon.
This fish is completely different. I mean,
yeah. So I believe they get over 100 pounds, and I said the best way is we've got a mouth like a tarpon with serrated, scissored, interlocking teeth.
Well, look, where do you start with these fish? I think that what you can say, the Goliath, it's a massive fish, and that's the first thing you notice about it is its size and how much bigger it is than any other fish. Like you said, up to 100 pounds. In some cases even more than that. And I think that's mostly due to the fact that it was, has come from such a big river system. If you look around the whole world, like your alligator gars, and I think it's from the Mississippi Basin, and you look at your piraivas from the Amazon, and you look at your Nile perch and stuff, big fish, big freshwater fish are birthed in big rivers or are evolved in big rivers. So, the Congo is the second biggest river in the world. So it makes sense that something big would evolve there. And, it happened to be a tiger fish. So these things, like you said, grow enormous. They vary quite a lot. They haven't got the striped bodies like what your Brevis and Vitatus, like from your Zambezi systems and in some of your other systems around Africa get. It's like we refer to them as common tiger fish.
Yeah.
And then you get the closest fish to it, I suppose, is the one in Tanzania and the Tanzanian rivers, which is the Tanzanian tiger. To discuss to identify a tiger fish, one of the easiest ways is, they've got a much longer face, a much longer mouth, and in fact, they've got two more teeth, top and bottom, than what a normal tiger fish does. So that lengthens the mouth quite considerably. Their teeth also can much longer. They're like fang-like teeth. When they're young, they look radically long, like a vampire fish's teeth. And as they get older, these teeth grow yellow in color. I'm not sure why, but I mean, I've heard people saying, like a 1.5, 2 inch tooth or something like that. And I mean, that's an enormously long tooth. You also see that their heads, a normal tiger or a common tiger has got like a bullet-shaped head. And then your Tanzanian tiger's got quite a straightish head. And then your Goliath has got kind of like a curve, from his neck down to his face. And there you see his elongated mouth. So that's one way that you can sometimes tell what it is. if it's not 100 pounds.
Of course.
And then, the size of its fins. I mean, they've just got these giant fins. And it's most notable with juveniles. And their fins are completely exaggerated. And, they don't have all the color that the other tigers have. They've only got a red tag at the bottom. But when you study them a little bit, you'll notice that some of them, the red in the bottom of the tail actually differs quite a bit. I don't know if there are subspecies. I mean, in something as big as the Congo Basin, I'm sure that, down the line we'll figure out, or through DNA testing, we'll figure out that there are various species of Goliath. Yeah. But, that remains to be proven. But they have got enormous fins, and so they've got these beautiful silver bodies, enormous fins, massive teeth, and so that's how you kind of tell them apart. But their behavior is remarkably different to any other tigers. But I think that the most important.
And in terms of their behavior, in terms of how they compare to other fish, also I remember you telling me completely different.
Look, the thing is, I couldn't necessarily, compare it to anything else. In fact, Edward Gowie, my partner in Goliath expeditions, the guy that's basically made this whole thing possible as well. Him and I both said, there's actually no way that you can compare this fish to anything, But let me give you some of the insights.
You got a Goliath cap, yeah, it's the Goliath, the one that you gave.
that was by Nick Laferriere. I can't pronounce his surname quite well, but he's quite a cool artist, and he did that head for somebody, and I just took it off a sketch of his. So look, the thing about these fish is that you used to hear about, when live bait fishermen fish for them and stuff. Because, I mean, that's the only research you really have. Literature like Douglas Dan's book, The Goliath, Biggest Tiger Fish in the World, and so forth. And everybody says the same thing, when the bait is in the water and so, they have a float above it, and that bait starts getting nervous sometime before it gets hit, which kind of tells you that Goliath is inspecting, or it's swimming around its prey at first. And when they hit the prey, 9 times out of 10, I mean 99 times out of 100, they'll hit that prey right behind the pecs and dorsal fins from behind and sever it, And I think that's mostly to avoid their pectoral and their dorsal spines that are barbed, all right? So they debilitate it first, and then they come around and they eat the rest. So, I mean, this is a thinking fish. Yeah, this is not the gluttonous monster that people think it is. It's a smart fish. And so that's what happens. And they've actually got an amazing modification in their mouth, in the sense that all of the flesh or on the inside of their mouth is extremely soft. If you have a hook that only hooks the flesh and doesn't go into the bone, I mean, you end up losing that fish quite often. We dissected a small one, after toiling and losing fish on our very first trip there, and put a hook into its mouth, closed its mouth, felt it purchase, pulled it through, and then it would just tear from the flesh. And I think it's an adaptation in case that the Goliath makes a mistake and gets some of the barbed spines in its mouth, and then just simply by shaking its mouth or so, it can get rid of it.
Yeah.
But these are all theories, but this is also what makes this fish so incredibly difficult to catch. I mean, it inspects its prey. So you're putting a fly out there, and this thing's swimming around there looking at the fly, going, like, where are the pectorals and dorsal fins?
Sure.
So, we'll get to fly selections, but, I mean, that's the first thing. And then when it hits it, you've got to drive it through the bone. And I mean, I'll tell you what, we really, really struggled on our first trip to get that. And, and after that, the fight. I mean, we'll get to just how these things fight. But I'll tell you, it was, I've never, ever seen a fish move like this. I've never seen a fish move that fast anywhere, any fish. When they...
And I mean, you've caught 200-pound tarpon, you've caught 100-centimeter GTs, you've caught 80-pound Nile perch, you've caught some substantial fish. So it's quite a big statement for you to say something like that. And obviously it's not for...
Being attacked by a barracuda on Basses to India. I mean, it's like... But, I mean, there's no fish that moves like this fish, So, on the behavior of them, the speed that these fish achieve, and how sharp they can bank and stuff. And I presume that's due to these oversized fins of theirs. But, from just one more thing about their behavior that's very interesting, I actually spend a lot of time watching people that keep them in aquariums. If you're following a hashtag of Goliath tigerfish, they often pop up in people's aquariums. And you'll see that, when people have a common tigerfish and a Goliath in an aquarium, the common tigerfish swims around quite a lot. It's constantly exploring its environment. And the Goliath just sits still, pumping water over its gills, And it sits and it watches. And it also always sits at a certain level, and it actually sits fairly close to the top. They don't venture to the bottom as much as what your other tigers do. And that actually makes fishing for them what I consider so much better than for your common tigerfish species and stuff. Is because, really the most effective way that I've ever fished for them, from the very first time I started until our very last trip, was definitely, just subsurface on like an intermediate line, even a floating line.
Yeah.
But yeah, so their behavior, they definitely, and they'll hang in mid-water sometimes, and so their movement patterns and stuff are a little bit of a mystery to me when they're in a big open system. They're not exactly very easy to see.
Sure.
And we've always gone, when we fished for them, gone on the presumption that they act like other tigers. And I mean, I've studied common tigerfish quite a bit, and in multiple scenarios that I see them move from spot to spot to spot, and then reset, move from spot to spot to spot. So, a little bit of thought into, if you're going to move, whether your next cast might not have encountered a fish that was patrolling the area, but.
Sure.
That's kind of, the only approach that we really had fishing for them in the beginning.
And Fran, how did it come about? I mean, let's discuss your first trip into sort of deep, dark Africa, what that entailed, some of the victories that you guys got on that expedition, some of the losses that you guys got on that expedition, and where and how it's managed to progress to the state that it's in today, and what you have managed to find with Goliath expeditions and with Ed. And we can then go into the details about, I mean, I remember you and I prepping fly packs for that exploratory trip, the second one you did, and spending 2.5 hours airbrushing each individual fly. It was, when you're tying a fly for the one fish to rule them all, it's not, there's unfortunately nothing commercially available. Your standard Mrs. Simpson Walker's Kill is not really it's not gonna dot the I's and cross the T's. So tell us about your first trip and what you guys found there, and did you get any Goliath tigerfish, and what happened, and where you guys are today with Goliath expeditions?
Yeah, look, I mean, the first trip was to the DRC. So, if you have studied Douglas Dan and, some of the other people that have gone for Goliath, the DRC in, at the Black River, the confluence of the Black River and the DRC, that's a renowned place for people. And I would say that the majority, if not more than 90% of the pictures you see of people holding up Goliath tigerfish were generally caught around there. That's where you go. So, a guy by the name of Dirk Reicher, a very good friend of mine, I had no idea. I wasn't even really pursuing. I just knew I really wanted to catch one. But I wasn't making a plan about it. And, here comes another guy with the same passion as me. He says he's organized an entire trip. He's gotten hold of a company called Go Congo, and we're going to go. And, I said to him, well, let's film it. So we also invited a guy called Rob Malpage. And funny enough, a guy called Henny Papenfuss, an extremely good fisherman. If anybody knows about Henny Papenfuss and his reputation, I mean, he's one of the best fishermen in South Africa, I would say.
I believe he's a recreational fisherman, but he holds the world record in fly casting.
No. Well, he holds a South African record in fly casting, 65 meters with a 17 weight. I mean,
yeah.
And he trained under Steve Rajeff, he told me. And I must say, when I looked at his style, his casting, I was astounded. I mean, the dude that can outcast me with a fly rod easily. Yeah, I'm sure. It's crazy. Sure. But anyway, so he was also on the trip, but they were shooting something. And look, we toiled. I'm not going to go into the details too much about what all the techniques and stuff we attempted, but you know, finally, you know, after on about day 10 or 11, I hooked one, and, you know, fought it. And there's a video online of me hooking it and fighting it and then losing it. And, you know, that's when Henny came through and said to me, listen, you know, I caught one yesterday, and I'll tell you what, you know, this whole thing about all these trebles and double hooks and everything like that doesn't work. He said, use this hook. And he gave me a hook, a very, very special hook. And I looked at it, and I tied it.
Carry on telling the story. I'm just going to go and find that hook quickly.
No. You're not allowed to show it. You're not allowed to
yeah. Okay, yeah,
it's trade secret. No,
okay,
if you really want to know what hook it is, you can PM me. But so anyway, so, you know, we tied a fly on this hook, and by this time we had actually had a few strikes. We're fishing close to the surface, and, you know, that's when Dirk Reicher caught. You know, would we consider to be the first one ever caught on fly?
Well, officially recorded.
Not just verified.
Correct.
I mean, you know, there was a big thing about being the first, right? I mean, I'm sure it was something that, and lots of people ask me, you know, once Dirk had caught it, and I made such a big thing about it had never been caught on fly. You know, people say to me, you know, aren't you sad that it wasn't you? Aren't you sad that it wasn't you? And you know, I would always say to them, like, guys, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. Like, we just proved that it could be done. I don't care who did it. We proved it could be done.
Yeah.
But after seeing, you know, I must say, after what I saw in that area, I was extremely disappointed in what had happened to the resource, you know. I mean, the charcoal industry has completely ruined the riparian zone around the Congo, you know. I mean, the giant trees and stuff are no longer. There are big barges floating up and down, you know, just with tons of palm oil and things. And you know, every small animal and stuff has been hunted to virtual extinction and things like that. So,
and this is proverbial deep dark Africa.
Yeah, you know, it was, and I was really upset about it, and you know, also this space was so wide, and it was really a bit of a depressing scene, you know. It's something I wouldn't want to go back. I was getting fairly depressed and seeing, you know, the destruction and things like that. And I realized at that point that it was not about being the first, but it's about taking the first step to finding, like, the Shangri-La, you know, the as I explained to you, like the small clear river where there's a big black hole where the devil sends these things into the river, you know, like.
Sure.
But, you know, I wanted a place where, number one, you could see them, where you could sight cast at them, where there was, you know, pristine nature, and that was basically my main criteria. And once again, you know, people said, no, impossible. It's impossible. You know, also there's a lot of very bad practice, you know, mining in the DRC, and a lot of those on your small tributaries and stuff like that. And in many cases, they turn these tributaries to mud and so forth. And to everybody I speak with, whether it's an engineer that's done some work there working on a hydro plant, or whether it's somebody that's a facilitator at a mine or something like that, they all had the same story. They all said, yeah, no, we've seen them catch those things, but, you know, those rivers are chocolate, and you know, they don't catch a lot. You know, so for me to venture back, I would really need something special, you know. Yeah, and then we came across this. I mean, it was the weirdest thing, you know. I've been fishing with a guy called Patrick Sacco for a long time, and, you know, we became best mates at Cosmoledo. It was quite funny, you know. It was, and ever since, you know, we've been fishing around the world together. So, you know, all of the fish that you've just mentioned that I've caught on fly and stuff, he's also caught, you know. And in many cases, him and I went around the world to go and do it together. And he knew about my infatuation with this fish. And, you know, one day he said to me, look, you know, there's this guy that he used to go to school with, and he's a professional hunter in the Central African Republic. And he says that there's a river there that flows clear, you know, and has Goliath tiger fishing.
And you're like, cool, bro. Sounds good.
Where exactly? Where's CAR? Where is CAR? You know. Anyway, for a while he was reluctant, but finally gave me the guy's contact details. And you know, so I write to this guy. His name's Eric Marav. And Eric Marav was running a place called Kawa Safaris, you know, and they're running it in the Chinka Reserve. And the Chinka Reserve at the time was renowned for being a place of, you know, a place where you could find a bongo and a Lord Derby eland in one safari, you know, with a myriad of other animals and stuff. But I wrote to him and I said, like, hi Eric, I'm Francois. Says it, I believe that you've got a river that's basically that's unfished, or that people haven't explored, and that the river flows clear, and that the most difficult fish in the world to catch is in your river, the Goliath tigerfish, and and Eric writes back and he says, Francois, thank you for your message, etc. I must say I'm not really a fisherman, I'm a hunter, but in my opinion, the Goliath tigerfish is actually quite an easy fish to catch, and he says, we've got a small river that forms a tributary of the one that you're talking about, running past our hunting camp. And, I'm often having to upgrade my people that are fishing for food tackle because these things destroy them. And occasionally one of them comes out. And I'm just going, what? And he says, oh, yeah, and that river that you spoke about, or that area you spoke about, he says, yeah, it definitely flows crystal clear in the dry season. He says, and when I fly over it with my microlight, I can see big silverfish from the air.
Wow.
So, yes, Steve.
So at this particular time, you're obviously playing with yourself furiously over the course.
I couldn't believe. I could not believe what I'd heard, and I just said, like, come hell or high water, I'm coming. And
in more ways than one, yeah.
And it was touch and go. And at the time there was turmoil in the CAR, and there had been, I don't think we have to go into what was happening at the time, because it was pretty frightening, and it took a lot of courage to go. And it was actually my mum that finally said, you should do it, but did say that I must leave my written will and testament behind if I do.
Sure.
So it was, and that really made the reality sink in. It was really a point at which I thought, yes, maybe this is not a good idea, But I'm very grateful for the inspiration and so on. And we went, and I was supposed to go with a friend, Jonathan Ralph. And Jonathan Ralph's family had found out that I'm trying to drag him into the CAR, and they just went. But amazingly, just I've just been so lucky in finding these fish, I must say, and from Dirk Reicher sponsoring me my first trip to go there, doing all the research, to people like Patrick coming up with this thing, this idea, or with this contact, and to Jonathan Ralph just saying, like, don't worry, you can go, I'll pay for it, because at the time I'm a guide, man, I'm on the bones of my ass most of the time. So
yeah,
and then to go, so I've had so much help, and it's been incredible. And I arrived at this place, and it was actually fine. You're sitting there going, like, it was actually a funny story, because I was sitting at the airport on the way there, and there was, at the airport, you're looking around and you see a few people, and you strike up a conversation here or there. So there was a doctor from Doctors Without Borders there for the whole war effort, and there was a security guard from the DRC, big guy wearing camo and with his gun with him, and there was there were a few people like that, and they were all there for the war effort. And they couldn't believe I was there for fishing. They just
in the middle of a war
thought I was mad.
Yeah.
But end up going, and wow, what a fantastic experience. But it was tough. It was extremely tough.
I just remember, obviously talking to you for years about the Goliath and things. I'll never ever forget. I think you had a little bout of signal, or it might have been when you just came back. And it's like I get goosebumps thinking about it. It's also like slightly emotional. I got that SMS from you, and it just said, "I got him." I'll never, ever, ever, ever forget that. Yes. So tell us about him, Francois. How did that happen, and who is he? Yes.
When I got, the funny thing is when I got to the Chinko River the first time, because it was a hell of a thing. There was headquarters here to fly into. They had found some tinny that some guy had abandoned or sold them before fleeing the country, and they had this small little Evinrude motor with they used an oil can for fuel with and stuff, and loaded it all onto a Land Cruiser and sent me into the bush with 5 people to help me. And when we arrived at the river the first time, I looked at it, and my whole world crumbled. I looked and I went, shit. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is impossible. This fish cannot be in this river. Jack, it was about 2 inches deep, all the way across, and it wasn't very far across. Okay.
Yeah.
And as you could see the bottom, you could see the mud, and I'm going, oh God, we've wasted our time. And I have to say that it took me many weeks of fishing and just like, find nymphing for things and, like eventually catching an Nile perch or two, getting to know the river a little bit better until one day I got to this sandbar, and I went and stood maybe dangerously close to the edge of the sandbar and kept fishing. By now I was fishing for Nile perch because there was definitely no Goliath there. And I was fishing with straight to go 50, 60 pound fluorocarbon onto a hook, 12 weight rod, casting. And the next thing on a strip, boom, like this. Do you know, you've been fishing long enough to know when you've just been bitten off completely. And your next strip has got no weight, there's no more fly, and you go,
yes, yes, I know that feeling well.
And it's a Nile perch flies. I mean, the thing is 12 inches long, and it just went thunk. And I get it back, and it's just clean cut fluoro. And that's the first time I thought, when you know something but you don't, but you dare not believe what you think you know, but you're denying it because you don't want to create like an expectation.
Of course.
But
you've tucked your erection in the waistband, and you're trying to console yourself that you're trying to go through in your mind what actually happened.
Dude. So then, we're traveling further up and stuff, and I find this one pool, and now it's been a day or two. No, it's been a day or two. It's been a day or two. And we find this pool, but man, this pool is different. This pool is just different. Something about it is I had this eerie feeling. The trees are much taller and around this pool and stuff, and there are these massive sandbars and rocks, and I mean, there are these colobus monkeys jumping through the tree. These things look like ghosts when they're hopping from branch to branch, and it's just, wow, I had this really strange feeling when I got there. And I mean, we fished a little bit, and the next thing I go tight, and you don't know what to think. I'm tight, and I'm wishing it's a Goliath, wishing and pulling, and it wasn't really fighting, and it was just kind of came to the surface and then flopped on the surface. But it was a Goliath. And I was like, go, get the boat there, And I'm stripping and they're rowing and stuff because there's things flopping around. And as we get to it, and it's not a big tiger, it's about, 80 centimeters, which is still a big fish, but I mean, and as it flops about, I'm looking over it, ready to try and grab it. And there's this big, shape under it. And I look, and on just within a second, this thing comes up, and it's a Goliath, and it grabs my fish right on its back, all right, on the surface, and it's looking at me like this with the other fish in its mouth. And I'm pulling, but and now it's chomping down on this fish. And my guy Alphonse, he takes a paddle and he starts hitting it with a paddle. Hitting this fish with the paddle. And I'm going, no, don't hit it. Just like get the boga. And this fish doesn't let go, and it just holds. But then the next thing, he tries to get the boga, and as he tries to boga, this fish might fly out of the other fish's mouth, pops out. And this giant fish just disappears with the fish down. Disappears, and there's just the scales from this fish is just slowly sinking in under the boat, and this deep green clear pool underneath me. I mean, and Alphonse looks up at me, he goes, terrible. Because I didn't want to fish anymore.
But that's almost better. Yeah, it's almost better than actually landing the fish, is the story. So you've now discovered they're here.
Anyway, so now I go back. We go back to camp, and I must say that night, and I just really knew this meant so much to me. Because I mean, I couldn't sleep that night, and I literally recounted almost a timeline of my life in my bed. This is all I've ever wanted to do, and I'm at the precipice of doing it. I'm going to go do it tomorrow. I know I'm going to go do the impossible tomorrow. And wow, went the next day and actually found the severed Goliath on the bank, being eaten by this eel type fish.
You rashness. I want you to slowly recant. You wake up in the morning. What rod do you have? What fly? What tackle? How's the approach?
Yeah, I've got a Loomis GLX cross current. Well, what else are you going to go fish with when you go fish?
The best rod of all time, of course. Yeah.
And an able reel. I mean, that's what I have. You know, that's
yeah.
Those two things are
12 weight.
Those two things and my Toyota Hilux are the things that will never fail me. Okay.
Sure.
So, and it's a long way up, and we pushed the boat up and stuff. You know, the rest of the story really isn't that remarkable. Because I fished in the place where I thought it was and stuff, and then I didn't catch it, and I lost that feeling of the imminence of this happening completely. And I went back into just, like moving around the pool, casting almost mindlessly, thinking, what am I doing wrong? Well, and then it happened. And then I caught this beautiful fish, 101 centimeters.
That's about 35 pounds, hey, Franny?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I must say, I've never actually weighed one, that we've caught, I don't need to. It's a Goliath.
Sure.
It's a Goliath. I just want a picture of it. That's all. So I released this fish, but sadly it didn't survive. And that was very, very bad for me. I tried to revive it for about an hour or so, but I don't know what happened, what went wrong in the fight. But I was, the fish didn't survive. So I was a bit upset, and that's also why I don't really like speaking of that as much as, what happened with us the next time we went.
Sure.
Because the next time we went, now we're on safari. Now Edward has pulled out all the stops, but you can't believe what this guy managed to get into that country, okay, in record time. Like, I don't think anybody knows how he did it, but he got us motors and boats and tents and camp cots and whatever we needed, it was in there. And so now we're floating down the river. And
I did supply your flies, though, if I might just take a little bit of credit. Yeah.
Yes, you did. And we're floating down the river. We start the journey, and a day or two in, it was never going to be easy. A day or two in, we get an encounter with our first fish, slimes up the leader, definitely a Goliath. And we're going down, and we get to an area, and I'm looking around at this area. Yes, and I'm letting everybody else fish, and I'm going, I'm kind of guiding them, not really, but I'm maneuvering the boat. I'm letting it fish, and there's another boat, Mike Faye's on that boat. He's also fly fishing, and we get to the pool, and I say to Mike, go cast there. I've got a feeling about this place, and he doesn't. And Ed's busy with something, so I decide, I'm going to pick my rod up. But the whole time I've got this strange feeling about this place, and I make a cast, and about the third cast, unbelievable, right on the surface behind my fly, I see this massive silver flash, and the first time it breaches, you could see it's a monster. Yes, and I can't believe it.
Sam's just asking, what year was this, friend?
No, this was last year March.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, it was in February. So, we land this fish, and it's about another 100+ centimeter fish, and it's incredible, and we release it, and we're all holding our breaths, because I'd actually invoked quite a bit of fear into the guys about these fish maybe not surviving once we catch them, and the fact that we're operating in what is now a national park, and we can't be killing things in a national park. In fact, that whole trip we weren't allowed anything. Not one fish. We weren't allowed to kill a single fish and eat it on our drift trip.
Sure.
And that was the case. So anyway, this fish swims off and stuff, and I look up, and I realize it's exactly the same pool in which I caught my first one. Exactly the same. We go through the photographs afterwards, and we even compare the banks and the sandbars, and it's the same place. So there are too many instances like this, when I'm driving, on the road, and I'm wondering, yes, what, this is such a difficult project. Should I carry on? And the next thing I look up, and there's a street name saying Congo, going past. And the way that the serendipity or the fate of the whole thing is just really, I always say, it doesn't want to leave me alone. I've tried my best to get rid of it, but it will never leave me. So, and that's what these fish really do. if you really get into them, and if you've caught a few, then
so yeah,
wow.
you got that fish, Fran, and your second trip. I mean, I don't want to be dropping bombs in terms of the amount of figures and stuff like that you got, because I think that's bad juju. But you found them, and you found them in substantial numbers, and you found them in enough numbers, size, and quantity to actually go ahead full steam with the Goliath Expeditions operation, which I think is very telling in itself. You're not gonna take people across the world and go through that experience to have a fanny ass of an experience. You're gonna go there because this can actually be done. And I know that you guys got quite a few fish. You got quite and some very good fish at that.
Yeah.
You want to just chat a little bit about that and tell us.
Well, but I'll tell you what no, we will. I don't know how to say it. I mean, this is what we were looking for. This is it. This is what Ed and I term to be the last great adventure. Where in the world do you find a place with this combination of things? Where do you find a river like this with already identified 60 species of fish and the potential of about 120 species of fish? That's Amazon numbers, with this clarity, and from its source, the whole zone around this river is controlled by a national park. It is completely uninhabited. I mean, Jack, when I tell you that we didn't see a single person, we didn't see a sign of a single person. Only when we got right to the bottom of the reserve did we find some old fisherman's name carved into a tree, it was so old. I think there was actually a date to it. I think it was somewhere in 2003 or something like that. I can't even remember, but it's just this magnificent river, and I mean it's got your two biggest scaled freshwater species in Africa in it. It's got Nile perch as well.
Sure.
It floods. It has a great flood. It runs through. It runs through the most incredible landscape. It goes from savanna grassland to rainforest. It changes every hour or two that you're on the boat going down. We traversed 220 kilometers of this river over 6 weeks, and we didn't see a single human being. So
I think that's the most exciting thing, because we all go fishing to try and get as far away from civilization as possible. That's the allure of 90% of these destinations.
The most amazing thing, African Parks, the African Parks Network, and these guys, they're the best at what they do. These guys save national parks in Africa that cannot be sustained or maintained by their own governments they're hugely donor subsided, and they've undertaken to take over the Chinco, and the success that they've achieved. They've expanded the borders from 5 to 20,000 square kilometers, which is enormous, and there are ambitions to make it bigger. They've gotten rid of all of your cattle herders, poachers, and so forth. There hasn't been a violent incident in, I think, 4 years in the park, and they are just going from strength to strength. And we've got these people supporting us, pushing us, saying, yes, get this done. And we're the only people in there. An opportunity like this is where would you find another one? Where? Maybe my opportunity at the Ukanga, so in that sense, this is the perfect river. This is the perfect place, But so when we carried on in this trip, and that's where things really got interesting. We went about fishing for them with, Ed and Mike were really quite still set on fishing for them with fast sinking lines and so forth. And we were identifying deep pools, fishing the deep pools, and then just trying to cover shallow drifts as quickly and as far as possible until our next deep pool.
Sure.
And on one occasion, Ed and I are doing so, and there's a few of these big yellowfish type or labios around, and we're trying to target them on nymph, and they're massive. They're enormous fish, And there was one coming up, and I was standing wading in front of the boat, and Ed's on the boat, and we see this thing coming, and it's there's about 4 different ones. These ones we call them river buffaloes. And there's one with red fins and a black body, and there's one that looks like this one. And these ones are these turquoise, kind of light blue turquoise colored ones, and they're the biggest. Okay.
Yeah.
And this thing's coming up in about knee deep, ankle deep water, and I'm wading towards it and edge spotting, and it's perfect. I'm gonna really put the fly in front of this thing and maybe hook it, because once you hook it, forget it. They're too strong. And I'm putting the nymph in front of him, and he doesn't even respond. And on one cast, I'm putting the nymph on his head, and he doesn't spook. And I'm going, oh, come on. And now my line's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And then as I lift it to cast right in front of him, it turns. And it's a Goliath. And it looks at me. It looks at us. And it looks at Ed, and it looks at me, and we're just standing there with a nymph rod. And there's this Goliath in 2 feet of water, and it's enormous, Yeah. And that's when we started realizing, no, that thing has to be hunting. He has to be there for something. And that's when we started fishing for them in a very different way, And we also started using smaller flies, and much more accurate, more accurate casts into more purposeful places, and looking at drops and runs. And we achieved amazing success. But around every corner there was something new. On one occasion there was this small backwater. Tiny. The size of a courtyard. And behind an island, with a 6-7 inch gap going into it. Just obviously from the low water, been isolated. And I said to Ed, let's go in there. And Ed said, come on. And we got there, and there was a big bait ball right in the middle of it, and dropped in, and I don't know, in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, boom, biggest fish of the trip.
What a pleasure.
Froggy backwater. And in other places, we would go through a channel, where there are lots of rocks and stuff surrounding the channel. The channel's not very deep. It's probably 2 meters. And as we entered the first part of the channel, I lobbed my fly overboard and started stripping line out of my reel, like what you do. Oh, and I got pressed by a Goliath. And he just destroyed me. Okay. And so, wow, damn. And so, we're tying on another fly. There's enough wire left. I think he actually went through my wire. Tied another fly on, lob it overboard again, strip line out again. Boom, I get pressed again. Another one, okay, and I lose him as well. Okay. I tie on another fly, and I get hit again, and I lose another one. Okay, so 3 fish.
This is 3 for 3.
3 for 3, and I'm on 0. But Jack, these things are just incredibly strong. The speed at which they run is just phenomenal.
You told me you broke 4 fly lines on fish.
But I snapped almost every fly line I had on the trip. I was left with 2. I pulled, for the first time in my life, braided loops were pulled off the front of lines, snapped rods, had eyes stripped off my rod from a tangle going through ice, just ripping ice to shreds. I actually only had 1 12-weight left. I broke the Loomis, and I had 1 rod left, and the 2 first stripping guides were missing already.
It's the 12-weight horizon, eh?
12-weight horizon, and I had literally only my snake guides left on this thing, and I was fishing with that because I had nothing left. They destroy you. They're so brutal, and in one occasion I got hit, and a fish ran with my line, that my heart was thumping so hard in my chest that I seriously immediately thought about, shit, heart attack, calm down. That's how much it hurt. My heart was pounding in my chest so that it hurt my chest. And I actually thought that maybe, I didn't know how I was going to survive this trip.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, look, we found...
Not taking nothing away from the Goliath, but, your name is Francois Boonmaster. And Ed was saying, tell us, I remember you sending me a video of an enormous fish that you'd caught at night. It was enormous. It was, I've seen some big fish It was literally as if you had caught a frolicking baby hippopotamus and it was thrashing.
We were scared of it. I was too scared to, because when I landed it and pulled it into the shallows, we were all too scared to go to dislodge the hook. It was too big. It was too big. And I've never seen
it looked very similar to a red-tailed catfish. Josh asked there about some of the catfish species. It was a beautiful looking catfish species.
Yeah, look, I think the common name for them is a kamba, but you're right. They've got this big, fat, robust body, like what your piraibas and your red tails and like your motoros and stuff have in South America.
Yes.
I never knew that this fish even existed in an African river. I really didn't. When I saw this thing for the first, I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. This was unreal.
Is that the
it
biggest
actually pulled the boat because
there?
I was on the banks. There were some sand flies and stuff. So we were sitting in the boat, and when he took, he pulled the boat off the sandbar, and Ed had to retrieve the boat and pull the boat while I was pulling the fish in. It was a remarkable fish, but there are two species of catfish there. Look, this particular one, the kamba, I can't remember its scientific name. I mean, they are there, and I've got amazing video footage of them sitting in shallow water, and they can most certainly be targeted on fly. Most certainly. That's an aggressive fish.
Yeah, I don't want to rush you here, Fran. We're busy running out of time. We've got 1:30. We'll just go back on. We'll just do the live again and finish off. So yeah, don't rush the story, but just to give our viewers preempted a little bit. You also, one of our guys asked, are there some vundu species there? And I want you to relay how you hooked what you said was the most enormous freshwater fish you've ever hooked, even bigger than that gorilla that you caught.
I couldn't believe this. This was, we've heard about this. I mean, there's actually a horrific story. Okay, I'm not sure that.
Hold that thought, Fran. What I'm going to do is I'm going to end this and I'm going to go live again and we can join. Everyone's more welcome to join us. All right.
Cool. Cheers.